Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Evie Ferris, and I am also a member of the Parents Leadership Council Executive Committee and one of the co-chairs with my husband, Bob, of the regional programs, and I'm delighted to be with all of you today. I have to admit, though, the actual reason why I'm here in this building today is because my daughter kicked me out of her classes. She felt that as a junior, she was a little bit too old to have mom tagging along, and she was afraid I'd do something embarrassing, like maybe ask a question during one of her classes. So little did she know that I'd be invited over here and put in front of a microphone. This is the same daughter who, a few weeks ago, when I told her that I was going to extend my stay here by a few additional days into next week, because after all, I did come from California for this, she said to me, well, Mom, you know it's called Parents' Weekend and not Parents' Month. So, but I'm going to stay anyway. But we're delighted to have all of you today. We just had an excellent session on the sciences, and now we're going to be moving into the humanities. Today we are joined by 3 members of the faculty, 2 from the honors program, and 1 from the Carroll School of Management. And I'm going to start with Professor Mark O'Connor. Professor O'Connor has been teaching at BC for 30 years. In 1981, he was selected to be Assistant Director of the Arts and Sciences Honors Program and then Director of Honors in 1996. In 1991, he was chosen for the Phi Beta Kappa Prize for Excellence in Teaching in the award's second year of existence. That's quite an achievement. And next, we're pleased to have Professor Timothy Duque. He is the adjunct associate professor and supervisor of first-year students in the Arts and Sciences Honors Program. He's a specialist in Byzantine and late Roman history, medieval intellectual history, and early modern European history. Professor Duque holds a degree from Hobart College and also BC, from where he received his PhD. He has been a member of the faculty of BC since 1980. And this past summer, both Professors O'Connor and Duque were awarded a 3-year grant from the Davis Educational Foundation to design a more sophisticated technology platform for both students and faculty doing humanities research. And finally, we have Andy Boyton, who is the Dean of the Carroll School of Management. He is also a BC alumni and is founder and former program director of Europe's top-ranked executive MBA program. After graduating from BC in 1978, he continued his studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he earned both an MBA and a doctorate. He has taught at the University of Virginia and was a professor at the International Institute of Management and Development in Switzerland. While there, Dean Boynton also founded the IMD Executive MBA program, which Businessweek ranked as the 6th best executive MBA program in the world in 2003. BC is very fortunate to have him on staff. In their presentation, our panelists will describe how the teaching of the humanities pursues these 3 goals. Number 1, the students learn about important works, individuals, and movements in the humanities. Number 2, that they learn how to learn. And number 3, they learn about themselves in the process. So please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you very much, Evie. And thank you to all of you for coming. I'm Mark O'Connor. And it's a double honor for me to be with you today, since this is Parents' Weekend for me as well. I've got a son who's an undergrad, the 3rd of our boys to attend Boston College. In fact, just like Bob and Evie's daughter, he's in his junior year. Well, we're going to speak this afternoon about how humanities studies prepare all our sons and daughters for professional life. Just why do great books mean good business? Our time together is all too brief, so let's cut to the chase and ask what the humanities are about. The best shorthand definition I can give you would go like this. They're a shared search for an understanding of what it means to be human. The liberal arts and the humanities are studied in departments across this and many another university. We begin with the same technical grounding you'd establish in any academic discipline of thought. Doesn't matter whether the field is one you'd conventionally associate with humanistic studies, like, say, theology or philosophy, or one you might not think of in those terms, like, say, chemistry or mathematics. In all these areas, you first have to learn and master the subject matter. What is it, for example, that the text actually says? What is it the experiment does? Just how is the music composed? Once you study something enough, and you get good at the discipline that subject imposes, you develop a skill set. Students in every academic field move their way up the ladder of ever more complex and challenging topics as they follow their particular discipline's logic on how you get to that better place. But humanities courses then take an additional step, and they provoke students to examine self-consciously how they themselves have been changed by the new knowledge they've acquired. To ask questions like, how did I learn what I learned? Which concepts hung around and why? How did I get really good at this? From this sort of questioning can begin what in the Jesuit tradition is termed discernment, namely a fuller awareness of the consequences of our actions on ourselves, on others, on the world around us. So the quest for our kids, their quest as students and independent young adults, is both to identify their talents and then to frame them. Let me give you a case study out of my own class, and in fact from just yesterday, to demonstrate what I'm talking about. My sophomores and I looked at a series of self-portraits, the ones you're watching morph and move around. The artist is Albrecht Dürer, and the scope of his achievement makes him a central figure in any course dealing with the Renaissance. He's born in 1471, he dies in 1528, and he executes the series you're looking at between the ages of 20 and 28. In keeping with our topic today, it's worth pointing out that not only is Dürer supremely talented, he's also supremely entrepreneurial. I expect my sophomores to know such facts about Dürer's historical impact. Of course, I expect them to know a lot more. But once we've mastered this level of detail, then examined closely each of the 5 self-portraits you see both for their technique and for the historical context, we return to the 5 as a series and look for what we can discern of an evolving sense of self in these self-portraits. I want to argue to you today that this cycle evokes the journey our students, our sons and daughters, are themselves experiencing. Take the first in the series, for example. Upon reflection, your daughters and sons most get caught up in the problem of the young artist trying so hard to see himself in the mirror that the strain shows markedly on his features. They know they are just his age in life, 20 years old. Dürer has caught himself self-consciously in the process of defining himself through his technical skills. By letting us see how his inner and outer selves meet through this straining, he prompts us to realize that we too, if we choose, can see ourselves in the making. The fourth in the series, by contrast, shows Dürer when he has made it. Dürer sees the possibilities in the new technologies of the printing press and in the possibilities for production of woodcuts and engravings. He pretty much invents trademark branding. His famous D inside the A, that once he perfects it, he'll add to every piece of art, whether it's a woodcut or an engraving, in fact, everything he sells. Before Dürer, you'd buy a piece of art because of the subject painted, or because of the quality of the presentation. From now on, after Dürer, you'll be looking for the trademark. You'll want to buy that work because it's a Dürer. In fact, he's now so well off and now so well known that Dürer can treat himself as a commodity, as his own trademark. He's a professional at the top of his profession, so good at what he does that he not only uses the self-portrait to show himself off stunningly in the very best clothes money can buy, he's also demonstrating that he's mastered the latest techniques in perspective painting. He does that by placing a view out a window next to his self-portrait. And not just any view. We're looking out at the Alps. Dürer is gesturing beyond them to Italy, where he went to improve his skills. Moreover, by this point at the age of 26, he's so incredibly good at what he does that we can't simply term him skilled at his profession anymore. There's a value added here. The value added here of a combination of mastery of his trade and of imagination in the way he applies that trade. So that has to be called something else, and the term we're going to be using for it today is virtuosity. Unlike the first self-portrait, Dürer now knows what he can do, and he as much reflects upon that as he does upon the reflection in the mirror. Then he applies this skill not just to portray himself, but to present himself, and in this way, to present his professional credentials. The last self-portrait in the series, an epical image for an epical year, 1500, is arguably as famous as any self-portrait in the Western tradition. It's often termed the Dürer Christ icon because by presenting himself face on this way, rather than three-quarters profile, he's assumed the portrait position that's normally reserved for Jesus. One way to interpret the pose, and the now almost transcendent virtuosity that renders Dürer's image so sublime, never mind his features, you'll notice, so improved, is that this self-portrait takes the self-advertising of the previous portrait to the most extreme possible place. The place that borders on blasphemy, since Dürer has, we might say, replaced the Christ and substituted himself. Often students will see in this much handsomer version of the strained youthful features they first examined, they'll see an early version of Hollywood. I remember one fellow in one of my classes looking at this image and calling it Brad Pitt on steroids. But at this point in the class, it's my job as an intellectual historian to point out that Dürer executed this incredible example of virtuosity when he was 28 years old, and that in his time, 28 was regarded as the apex of your physical life. It was thought you'd be as handsome and as intellectually gifted, in short, as humanly capable as you'd ever be at the age of 28. And after that, and I don't know about you, but this is a sobering thought for me, it was all downhill in physical terms for our human selves. So by this line of logic then, the so-called icon self-portrait is a self-consciously spiritual exercise, one where Dürer is employing the very best of his talents at the presumably highest peak, struggling once again, as we saw him in that first self-portrait, but struggling in a very different way than he did at the beginning of his studies, to represent himself like the Christ when he, Dürer, like his Savior, will be resurrected in glory. Take a look at the three self-portraits again. Each of the three images we've looked at represents a distinctive phase in a cycle of virtuosity. My students and I have studied a great artist, to be sure, but our humanities approach has also allowed us to follow how someone has progressed through intellectual, professional, and spiritual stages of development. And in each phase, to analyze self-consciously what he's learned, then to study how Dürer applies his ever more sophisticated knowledge and ability to fashion the self he's striving to achieve, and in the process, to influence the fashions of the world around him. So, at the end of our class yesterday, over how these series of images are to be interpreted, how we read these great works of art as great books, our common search on a Thursday afternoon in September for the humane in Dürer allowed me to send my students off to ponder these questions. How will they use their own straining and striving to master not just their studies, but to master themselves? How will they, like Dürer, find a way to frame their talents and their aspirations, to frame them through their intellectual progression? How will they frame this search for virtuosity? Well, with these questions now in your mind too, I yield the floor to my colleague, Tim Duckett, who's going to show you some examples of how our students are trying to do just this sort of learning. Tim?
Whoops. Hello, all. Let me pick up where Mark left off. How do students at Boston College actually encounter the humanities and push themselves toward virtuosity? Of course, they do. They continually accumulate knowledge. They increase their sophistication in approaching new ideas. And they expand their understanding of various liberal arts majors and disciplines. But then they also add themselves to the equation. They write, they make things, they add value. So allow me to demonstrate a little bit. One of the texts that students might encounter during their studies is James Joyce's Ulysses. Student Jay Lucci, whose work is on display here, student Jay Lucci read Ulysses and became interested in a chapter because of its proverbial Joycean difficulty. The chapter is chapter 14. It's often called the Oxen of the Sun. You may remember Ulysses from your own studies and recall that in addition to being a long, complicated narrative about one day on June 16th, 1904 in Dublin, Joyce's text is dense and layered with experimental explorations of the English language. And each chapter is a different sort of exploration. Jay created a website, a study text, to show how the Oxen of the Sun chapter is constructed. But this was only once he, Jay, himself had mastered the text and read what scholars had written about that chapter. His solution uses digital technology to build a study tool that far outstrips what would be possible with a static text. What you see is the text of the chapter itself on the left, through which we can scroll. I'm trying to demonstrate something I know you can't read very well. As we scroll, we can select hot links to examples on the right, hot links to examples of prose that scholars have established were the styles and authors Joyce used and parodied in this chapter of his book. Those sources are displayed on the right. And we can see that the chapter on the left is then revealed as a narrative that employs a vocabulary from Old English to the most modern English of the early 20th century, through one stylistic development after the other. So, in Joyce, we experience our language being born, while the novel tells the story of the difficult birth of a child, the difficult labor in the National Maternity Hospital of Dublin on June 16, 1904. Now, what Jay Lucci was trying to make visible and clear in this project is most difficult, and it's nearly invisible. The problem has occupied many a scholar and many a scholarly career. The presentation of this source material is a gargantuan task. It's a big deal. And as with the best of student accomplishments, the final product appears to make it look so elementary. This is a sophisticated approach to presenting scholarship on Joyce. On to another great book. Likewise, students reading Dante's Divine Comedy meet another notoriously difficult book, a notoriously difficult text, something like chapter 14 of Ulysses. This is the Purgatorio, the second of the three parts of the Divine Comedy, of the Commedia. Again, you may remember Dante from your years in your reading in college or in high school. The Purgatorio is the most puzzling of the three parts of the Divine Comedy. And perhaps that's because it's the only place where the hero, that is Dante himself, the pilgrim, and his readers, you and I, are challenged to ourselves change. Dante Alighieri believed, or so I think, that poetically, or he believed that poetry itself could change people. It could change 14th century Florentines. If he believed that, he believed as well it could change you and me, or even that it could change college undergraduates. So how do students experience and thus truly understand this marvelous poem that creates a mountain 7 terraces high that can only be ascended by mastering the 7 deadly sins? In other words, how can a 21st century set of students demonstrate their understanding of this 14th century poem from such a different time? Our team of students created an interactive computer game called Virtual Purgatory. We'll go back to the entrance. Let's take a look at only one level of their virtual purgatory to give you a little demonstration of the quality of their thinking. We are on the terrace of the slothful. Sloth, you may recall, is the 4th of the vices. It's the 4th terrace on Mount Purgatory as well. Just to remind everyone, they run pride, anger, pride, envy, wrath, sloth, and then avarice, gluttony, and lust. Sloth right in the middle. Sloth, the 4th terrace up the mountain. Sloth is an aversion to work or indolence, laziness. That also includes a student trait, procrastination. And Dante's genius in the Purgatorio, the genius of this poetry, is to make the reader feel the sloth, if you will, and to find a way to overcome it. So we're on the terrace of the slothful, and I will be going through this website as though I were using a computer and I was following links in it. And on the first page, I encounter cui lugent at the bottom of this page. Blessed are those who mourn. Beati cui lugent. On every one of the terraces of purgatory in Dante's poem, there is one of the Beatitudes from Matthew's Gospel. In this case, it's the thing that the shades, the souls, rushing about on the terrace of the slothful, endlessly in a circle around on this plateau, are chanting. Blessed are those who mourn, cui lugent. But it's also a hot link. If I were on my computer in my office or at home, or if anyone using this, what this is a piece of computer programming that freezes the computer. And then it tells me, have you repented your slothful ways? And like all of these annoying pop-ups, I want to be done with it and get back to the website, get back to all this wonderful information on purgatory. Are you sure? Now I'm clicking it again. Why don't I believe you? Now I'm finding this frustrating, annoying, it's pushing toward offensive, and now I'm lazy. Now, at first, I sensed this is a bad joke that they're playing on me, everyone else, and I'll never get out of here. I just don't get it. I go back to try some more. You're lazy, lazy, you are lazy. And it keeps going on as I hit OK again and again. Anyone who's used a computer has been here. It's not purgatory, it's hell. Why are you hesitating? I'm hesitating because I'm upset. And then you start talking to the computer, right? Time is running out. Yeah, you bet it is. Hurry, okay. Now I'm starting to get it. This program is telling me that I'm slothful, indolent, lazy. Do you want to be trapped forever? Repent for your sins. Now I realize if I just hurry up, I can get out of there. And this is a shortened version of that page. It goes on interminably. So, I get off the terrace by realizing that defeating sloth is a matter of showing some eagerness without needing the promise of a reward, without being told why. Just do it, or something like that. So, paradise at last, the dove of peace, and then we, boom. This blinding light is the light of truth. Once truth is obtained, you are filled with everlasting knowledge and joy, have a great eternity, and so we're out of purgatory, we're moved up to paradise? No. Paradise at last? No. This next stop takes us back to the theme of our talk, what Mark and Andy and I are all talking about. One student success, one student project like this, quite simply leads to the next in a cycle of virtuosity. It's as though we're talking about the terraces of purgatory. One terrace leads to a higher terrace. Yes, it's a higher terrace, but it's still a terrace with many more challenges. And the humanities are like that, or so I think. So what this slide does is shows you a website which takes you back to all the databases that Boston College has available and are available all over the world for the study of Dante and further study of the Divine Comedy. So this is a cycle. It's a never-ending upward spiral, we hope. And some people. This was how a group of students, virtual purgatory that is, solved part of the problem of demonstrating the experience meant by Dante on the terraces of purgatory. It provides an experience, again, that would not be possible, like Jay's site, would not be possible without their integration of ideas from the text, from purgatory itself, with their own inventiveness and their own set of skills they've been accumulating all the years they were at Boston College. Virtual purgatory is quite elegant. It looks simple too, just like Jay Lucci's site. But it took weeks and the working together of a great many people. It took an entire semester. The humanities provide an endless supply of challenges like these. Challenges like Dante's Purgatory, the Purgatorio. These challenges lead students to first study to understand, and then demonstrate that understanding in a solution that looks simple and obvious, maybe, but only looks simple and obvious because it's on target. It got it right in some way. The student work shown here hit upon some element of the true nature of these texts. Their work enriches our understanding of the texts by providing fresh points of view in engaging formats, thus virtual purgatory. This work is evidence not only of diligent humanistic scholarship, but of adaptive learning, something you can adapt to other contexts as well. The study of the humanities drives the human mind to integrate new technology. Even I can deal with a handheld thing like this. To integrate new technology with long traditions of complex thought in ever more satisfying, productive, and I suggest humane ways. Now, this final slide shows a group of students from last spring who made their first acquaintance with Dante, and that's who's down here in the first row. A life-size bust. I happen to be up there in the peanut gallery behind everybody. But these students also, in reading Dante for the first time, each made their separate, solitary struggle climbing Mount Virtual Purgatory. Anyway, now I yield the floor. I yield it to a far from slothful gentleman, Dean Boynton of the School of Management. You're on.
I guess that's a compliment, because I'm learning a lot of this myself for the first time. We're going to now talk about how these ideas relate to what we're doing and a seeming point of departure in the School of Management. And I've spent most of my career in schools of management, and it's far from Joyce and Dante and Durer. So I'm pulling it down. There we go. A point of departure and just some information is the Carroll School of Management at BC. And we have about 2,000 undergraduates, about 800 graduate students, 2,000 undergraduates. I'm sure many of your sons and daughters might be in the School of Management. We educate future professionals in a series of disciplines. And those disciplines are accounting and finance and marketing and operations and so forth. And they learn a lot about it. And about half their time at Boston College is spent in the School of Management. And essentially, the young woman that graduates from the Carroll School after she leaves Boston College will have the technical skills, the concepts and theories that are necessary to move organizations forward, to act on those organizations' visions and goals. And we think that's particularly important because in the world today, organizations and institutions are how things get done to a large degree, whether it's corporations or scientific institutions or legal institutions. Organizations are how things get done. And in some ways, the Carroll School, I like to call it the school of human potential, because we're trying to get the most out of people in those organizations to serve society in multiple ways. So that's a point of departure from Joyce and Dante and Durer. But there's a powerful point of convergence that we would like to talk about. That all of our students at Boston College are future knowledge professionals, whether they're scientists, lawyers, doctors, professors, or managers or leaders in our society. They're knowledge professionals in that they make their living based on what they know, on how much they know versus the strength of their backs, what's in their head. They also are going to compete in this world because they have to be effectively smarter than other people. What does it mean to be a knowledge professional? It means that our students will all earn their salaries, they'll all have their careers, they'll all add values to their organization, they're all going to serve society based on three fundamental skills. So their ability to do that will be dependent upon, first of all, the quality of the ideas they can obtain. So as they go through life, they have to be able to obtain the right idea, discern what's an effective idea, what's a useful idea, what's not a useful idea. They have to understand where their sources for great ideas will come from. They have to understand who to talk to. They have to set explicit strategies to get great ideas. All of us are knowledge professionals. I'm sure many of you are knowledge professionals. And it's interesting, I could probably say, how many people here really know where their best ideas come from? Do you have a strategy to get great ideas? And for all of us in the room, we should have answers to that, and many of us don't. And yet we want our students to be able to answer that question, to be able to go out and obtain great ideas. It's not only getting great ideas, though. All of our students have to be able to put those ideas into play. In terms of timing, the form of the idea, so that when people hear the idea, they react positively, so that their ideas can affect change, whether it's in their organizations or in society. Having a great idea, if they can't impact change, the idea has zero value if they can't put that idea into play. There's one more skill that we think is the most important competency for students going forward, and that is the ability to learn how to learn. This is the copy of an article by Thomas Friedman, the writer, who is breaking some important new ground. And in this article, he talks about the most important competency for the next century is that professionals learn how to learn. It's not what you know at a given moment. It's the ability to move through life and learn new things progressively over and over and over. In many ways, it's a cycle of virtuosity that Mark discussed. It's getting better all the time. Effective knowledge professionals see life as a stream of potentially valuable ideas. They don't see life as going to work, another day at the job, just getting things done. They look at life as ideas, and those ideas are changing. Some are deep, some are shallow, they're unpredictable, it's fast-moving. Some of those ideas are dangerous, but they're invigorating. But in that stream of ideas, effective knowledge professionals have to be able to find the right idea and learn as much as they possibly can. So they have to be able to discern and pick out the right idea and then put that idea into play. Alternatively, effective knowledge professionals also have to understand that everyone around them is a potential target to learn. Many of my students that I've had over the years, I've been here as a dean for 8 months, and before that for 10 years in Switzerland, I worked with executives. And the first thing, especially MBAs, the first thing they do is they evaluate. Do I like this? Do I like the professor? And they're evaluating everything. And I say, stop. Stop evaluating. Every professor you come in contact with, every experience you have, every company you do business with is an opportunity to learn. Don't evaluate, learn. So effective knowledge professionals see those targets to learn, and in many ways, this is how birds see the world. We all know that, right? We walk around, we're all targets. Now, how do knowledge professionals see the world? The same way. I'm just going to tell you a little side story here. I didn't plan on doing this, but it just illustrates the point I always think about it. Walt Disney. He was in Europe at Tivoli Gardens. He was with Art Linkletter. They were walking around. This goes way back, before Disney was really known. It just was coming out with cartoons. They were in Tivoli Gardens, and he noticed how the parents were having a great time with the children, and everybody loved it. He said, this never happens when I go to the park in Los Angeles. I just go, the kids have a great time, I'm bored out of my mind. So he spent several days in Tivoli Gardens. They only planned to spend a few hours. He measured everything. Disney was on the ground. He was measuring the sides of this. He was measuring where the benches were. He was looking at where the concession stands were, where they had the rides. He was trying to understand the whole thing because he said the physical proximity of all of this is what's forcing the interaction and having everybody have enjoyment. He took all of that learning, those targets of learning, he brought them all back, Disneyland. That's moving through life, learning all the time. There are two primary reasons why we think this is true, why all of our students are future knowledge professionals. The first is, again, borrowing from Friedman in his book, The World is Flat, he persuasively argues that the best skills, expertise can be found anywhere in the world. They're accessible, they're active, and they're mobile, and there's no place to hide. And I know when I was growing up, my mother would say, and I'm sure many of yours, and we still say it to our children, I do to mine, eat what's on your food, there's someone starving, eat what's on your plate, there's someone starving in another part of the world. Now I give my children a different message. Study hard, work hard, learn how to learn, because there's people out there that want your job and they're going to work a lot harder. And their ability to take their knowledge and their expertise, no matter where they are in the world, they can use that expertise where you are, and the rules of the games have changed. So the world is flat. We need to have students graduate from Boston College that compete in that world, and being an effective knowledge professional is the answer. The other reason why being an effective knowledge professional is key is that the fundamental nature of career has changed, in my opinion. It's no longer a sequence of job titles. And we don't want our students, especially my students in the Carroll School, all they're worried about is their first job title and how much they're going to make. It's not that job title that matters. Life is now a series of learning trajectories. And the first job is going to have a certain domain of knowledge associated with it. But I don't want them thinking of themselves as accountants or brand managers or investment managers or whatever, or investment bankers, whatever. Think of themselves as a knowledge professional. Get the job, because sooner or later they're going to have to learn a whole new, complete set of ideas and concepts for the next progression in their career. The other is that used to be that pedigree, personality, and credentials was what it was all about. Maybe unfortunately it still is, but I don't think as much as it used to be. So it's who you were, where you're from, what school you went to. Now it's much more reliance on ideas, much more reliance on attitude and behavior, what you can do. And you have to learn all the time to be effective. In addition to skills around getting ideas, obtaining the best idea, putting those ideas into play, learning how to learn, we also believe that knowledge professionals need to have the right attitude and the right appetite. And what we don't want them to see, what effective knowledges do not see themselves as, and effective knowledge professionals, is victims, pawns, and cubicle slaves in heartless organizations. And in my world, the world of management, I see this all the time, where I've dealt with hundreds of firms around the world, lots of executive education. I see young, bright, energetic people, and I see what the iron cage of bureaucracy does to many of them, and it dumbs them down. And a lot of this is about their attitude. They have to go in with the right attitude. And too many people minimize risk, respect the chain of command, support the boss, make budget, know only what they need to know to do their job, hoard knowledge for personal power versus move ideas for high performance. What a way to live. This is not how we want our students to move into the world. In a way, when we want them to look back and when their careers are over and they've thought about what they've done, we don't want their epitaph to read something like this. Andy Boynton, 1956 to whatever. He would have done great stuff in his career only if his boss had let him. He minimized risk. He respected the chain of command. He hit budget 44 quarters in a row. So what? Because at the end of it, this is what many organizations want, but this is not what great knowledge professionals are going to do. And we need to have students with the right appetite and attitude to break out of the pack. In summary, the effective knowledge professional has a lifelong appetite for learning. And it is about appetite. It's about finding people who are not interesting people, but who are interested in the world around them. It's about people with curiosity. Mike, earlier with the earlier presentation, talked about science, curiosity. Managers and leaders and knowledge professionals should understand science. They should understand hypothesis testing. They should understand how to get data, how to progress what they know. That's about learning. They know that great ideas come from unlikely places, not hanging around with the same people all the time. There's a great theory called strength of weak ties from a sociologist at MIT, Mark Granovetter, that the best ideas come from networks of weak ties, people and groups you usually never have to have any association with. So it comes from unlikely places, those great ideas, Walt Disney and Tivoli Gardens. Knowledge professionals know that most ideas are not new. When I'm out there working with people and someone says, I have an idea, and I say, where'd you get it? And they say they thought of it, I'm worried. I'm really worried because chances are someone else has thought of it and someone else has done better with it. So it's okay that they think it's new, but they should be exploring a little more effectively than that. Effective knowledge professionals know how to communicate ideas so they spread like a virus. We all know really smart people that can't get ideas across to impact change at all. That's not being an effective knowledge professional. And also effective knowledge professionals, they treat ideas like a Christmas gift rather than a burden. There's some people, when a new idea comes wrong, it's a burden. It's like, I have to change my position, my view. I don't want to do that. It's a burden rather than a gift to be treasured. What's the ideal education to shape this knowledge professional? Any ideas? The humanities. Exactly. The humanities. That is the breeding ground for great knowledge professionals, whether they're managers, whatever they're going to do. The humanities is a wonderful piece of education, it's a body of knowledge. Why is that the case? The ideas are complex, the ideas are rich, they're trying to synthesize those ideas, they have to learn those ideas, they have to understand what's going on, they then have to take those ideas, they have to communicate those ideas effectively. We can't treat the world as a simple place, whether it's an organization or the world at large. It's not simple. We need to graduate students who can deal with the complexity of the world. The humanities is where they can learn that. And if we think about what Mark did with Durer and his progression through his life, his own awareness of his own personal brand, of what he learned and how he developed his own skills, and this cycle of virtuosity, that's what knowledge professionals have to do. It's a mirror image of what effective knowledge professionals have to do. What a better training ground than to see those ideas in the richness Mark described. Or Tim, when he talked about you are lazy, this is perfect training ground for knowledge professionals, for managers and leaders. Because what Tim was doing with his ideas was understanding Keats and understanding Dante, complex stuff. He even had an interesting comment today. It stuck with me particularly. He said, this is difficult material. but it's learning how to wrestle with that difficult material and then taking it using advanced technology, multimedia technology, that will be the tool of today and the future knowledge professional, and take those complex ideas and then move those ideas into computer games and other forms of dispersing those ideas. That's what knowledge professionals are going to have to do. Understand complex ideas, use technology, and then communicate those ideas. So the humanities is a wonderful background for future knowledge professionals. It augments what we're doing in the Carroll School beautifully. And to a large extent, Boston College, in our opinion, is about shaping knowledge professionals who serve society. We have an opinion about how they should be shaped and how they should be formed. We have values about serving society, making the world a better place, as well as being a great university. And it's this cycle of virtuosity with learning how to learn. Together, they work in tandem. Now, there's a few more words I'm going to put up there, but I'd like to read something to you, if I may. Because really, what we're trying to do is instill our students with a certain perspective. This was sent to me by Father Joe Appleyard, who's in the Society of Jesus. He and I are going back and forth on some issues I'll describe in a minute in terms of understanding the heritage of Boston College. And here's a quote from someone far from the humanities and far from the world of management in a way. It's from Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi was the great football coach from the Green Bay Packers in the mid to early 1960s. So Lombardi said to his team, "Gentlemen, we are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we will not catch it. But we are going to relentlessly chase it, because when we do, in the process, we will catch excellence. I am not remotely interested in just being good." It's the pursuit of that excellence. It's the cycle of virtuosity. That's where the growth occurs. It's learning how to learn forever, and that is what Boston College is all about in terms of its core value, which is ever to excel. But ever to excel comes from Book 6 of the Iliad. I bet you didn't know I knew that. That's all I know. That's all I know. But I threw that in there for you. I threw that in there for you. But it comes from there. But, you know, it's not about sending a brave young warrior into battle anymore, which is what it talks about in the Iliad. But now it's about ever to excel, going into the world where what you know, what you can learn, is what's going to make a difference in all of the sons and daughters of Boston College's lives, and that's what we're all about. So thank you. Now, and I would like to say this, that this has been really just tremendous for me. And at Boston College, there's several different groups that are involved with the university. The staff plays an important role. The staff throughout the whole university plays an important role in education for your children. And there's also the administration, people like me who try to stay out of the way and help out when we can. But really at the heart of Boston College are your children, your children, and we want to thank you for lending them to us. They're at the heart of the educational process. And the other part of Boston College that really makes it tick are the faculty. And what you see here are two great faculty members who are so committed to these students that they just give the students the kind of experience that you want them to have and they deserve. So for me, it's been an honor and a privilege to put this together with Mark and Tim. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was just fascinating. I'm so jealous of my daughter being able to go to school here. We do have a few moments for some questions. So do we have some? Don't be shy.
How about if we come up here, then you'll... Close. We predicted that, didn't we? Are there any questions for us? Yes, please.
The question is, how do you integrate the theoretical side with the practical side?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to do it. I'll start and then the others can add in. I think one of the things to keep in mind is that a lot of the questions that Dean Boynton was talking about were questions that knowledge professionals named Socrates, for example, and folks with similar names after him were thinking about the same sort of thing. These issues will reappear. Human nature has stayed close enough to those questions that happily there'll be those kind of connections. But I also hope too, and that was part of my presentation today and part of the reason for it, that as the students are going through a career like Dura's, they'll pause for a minute on the professional portion that I showed you. And when they do, they'll think a little bit more about what they aspire to and what they want to be when they get to that stage themselves, even as they're looking at Dura. There's lots of integration that way. In our humanities sequence, we will have students from the Carroll School of Management, the Lynch School of Education, as well as the College of Arts and Sciences. And it's interesting to see them bring their various perspectives to the table with us when they look at a professional like Dura and then ask themselves, what kind of professional do I want to become? Finally, sometimes these can touch you in ways that haven't to do so much with the way you're going to integrate what Yeats in a great poem, The Choice, called the perfection of the work with the perfection of the life. They also come into the just fundamental question of, who am I and how do I understand myself and what ultimately do I expect myself to be? In the Dura series I didn't show you, one of my favorites is the one that morphed through where he has a kind of red hair and a kind of funny cap on the top. You might have seen that more for a second. He's holding in his hand, and we could have focused on it, a sprig of eryngium. Eryngium is a fancy name for sea holly. By its formal name, eryngium, it was chosen as a symbol of chastity. So the whole point of that self-portrait, if we'd been able to discuss it, is to hold that hand out and to say to one Agnes Frey, in a kind of photograph before you could draw them, Agnes, if you allow me to marry you, I will be that chaste husband you have always so much wanted. But eryngium, by the late Middle Ages, had a reputation, I can't tell you if it's deserved, as an aphrodisiac. So when he held his hands out like that and talked about chastity, he was also saying, Agnes, I'm good with my hands for something else besides painting. The way in which those contradictory meanings come together, I think, is an important answer to your question. Because part of what we want our students to deal with is precisely the complexity of contradiction. That they're going to have to hold it together in their own lives. That there may be competing answers that at one and the same time don't agree, and yet they're going to have to deal with both of them and accept both of them in some way.
As a sidelight, that group of students you saw earlier on the screen, that was a group of 14. 3 of them were from the School of Education, 4 from School of Management, and the rest were Arts and Sciences. And I can tell you that just having those, in a way, 3 different points of view coming together in a seminar with Dante is in itself a way of integrating the academic with the business side of things.
I'm a radiation oncologist in a small town in Oregon. And our hospital is trying to develop a new cancer center. And I'm interested in, how do you go about getting ideas about how to proceed? Just general categories. I mean, I'm thinking, well, you talk to people who've done it, you look on the internet, how do you develop a cancer center? You know, I mean, do you have any other broad categories of how to proceed?
No, but I think that's, I'll answer very quickly. I don't know anything about that particular world. But it's a matter of, the worst mistake is to sit there and reinvent the wheel. I have a view of life is go out and find the best ideas and borrow with pride. And
I call
that's
it
right.
steal shamelessly.
Steal shamelessly. But find, because what you're trying to do has been done before. We know it's been done well, we know it's been done badly. Somehow try to tap into that, whether it's systematically, and oftentimes it's getting out there physically and going out and meeting people. Certain learning can only happen belly to belly, elbow to elbow in terms of the tacit exchange, the exchange of tacit ideas. There's the internet. There's consulting firms that specialize in this sort of thing. But find out what's been done out there well, understand the distribution, learn from the mistakes of others before you make any decisions at all. Because it's been done. Why sit there and reinvent the wheel with as smart as you are? There's, in your organization, or you yourself, there's more ideas in your organization. There's more ideas in your state. There's more ideas in the country. There's more ideas in the world. It's incumbent on you to tap into those ideas. And in today's world, there's ways to do it.
Unfortunately, we have another session following, so we are going to have to conclude this one. But again,